Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature channel. Find a comfortable place. Let your body sink a little deeper into wherever you are resting. Let your shoulders fall. Let your breath slow down, in through your nose and out, soft and easy. Tonight, we are going to wander into a world that is quieter than a whisper and older than almost anything you can imagine. We are going to listen, really listen, to the language of plants. You might think that plants just stand there, still, silent, rooted to the ground, waiting for rain and sunlight, not speaking, not reaching out to one another. But here is the most beautiful secret. They are never, ever silent. Not once. Not for a single moment. Plants are constantly talking, feeling, and responding to the world around them and to each other in ways that are so gentle and so patient that we are only just beginning to understand them. Imagine standing at the edge of a meadow in the soft gold of early morning. The dew is still on the grass. The light is pale and warm. You can hear birdsong somewhere far away, and the breath of a breeze moving through the tall stems. It all looks perfectly still. And yet, beneath the soil under your feet, through the air above the flowers, along the delicate threads of root and fungi, there is an entire conversation happening, slow, purposeful, deeply kind. The first thing to know, and it may surprise you, is that plants can sense their neighbors. A small seedling pushing up from the earth can actually detect the presence of other plants nearby, even before their leaves ever touch. They do this partly through light. When sunlight filters through a canopy of leaves above, it changes color slightly. It becomes more red and less blue-green. Seedlings can feel this shift and understand that there are other plants close by. And so they adjust. They reach a little differently. They grow in ways that are gentle and cooperative, not just competing, but also, in many ways, simply being aware. Scientists who spend their lives watching and measuring these things have described it as something like perception. Not thought the way you and I think. No, it is much quieter than that, but a real and sensitive awareness of the surrounding world. A plant feels the quality of the light the way you might feel the warmth of a fire, without seeing the flames, just sensing the glow. Take a moment and breathe that in. The world of plants is not one of loud signals and urgent messages. It is one of patience, of slow, steady, ancient knowing. Another early discovery was about roots. Long before we could see it clearly, farmers and gardeners sensed that plants grown together often did better than plants grown alone. There was wisdom in companion planting, the old way of putting certain flowers near vegetables, certain herbs near fruit trees. Generations of growers learned by watching, by touching the soil, by tasting the harvest. They could not have explained the chemistry behind it, but they understood the feeling of it. The garden was happier when it was diverse, when more plants were part of the conversation. And isn't that a wonderful thing to think about as you settle into rest tonight? That even outside your window, in whatever garden, field, or patch of green exists near you, plants are exchanging something. There is a quiet life going on in every root system, in every leaf, in every stem standing in the dark. Not frightening, not at all, just present, just alive, continuous and unhurried, the way a river is always moving even when you cannot see it from where you stand. The roots of a single tree, did you know, can extend outward twice as far as the tree's canopy spreads above the ground. A tree that looks like it belongs just to one spot of earth is actually touching a much wider world beneath the surface. Its roots are long, exploratory, tender threads reaching out through the dark soil, following water, following nutrients, and often following the traces of other roots nearby. They feel their way slowly through the ground the way your hand might feel its way in a dim room. Careful, searching, present. When two tree roots meet in the soil, they do not always compete aggressively. Sometimes, especially in forests, where trees of the same species grow near one another, they simply exist side by side, each one giving a little space to the other. Some root pairings even seem to cooperate, sharing water during dry spells, passing nutrients between trees that are struggling. It is a kind of underground generosity that has taken us a long time to name, but that the forest has always practiced. Let the thought of that underground generosity soften your body. Let your legs feel a little heavier. Let your arms rest. The world beneath the soil is not cold and lonely. It is warm and full of quiet connection. Plants also communicate through time, not the fast time of our days and weeks, but the slow time of seasons and decades. A tree that was damaged by drought 3 summers ago carries the memory of that stress in its wood. You can see it in the narrowness of a growth ring when the tree is cut. The tree does not forget. Its body holds the record of hard years and easy years, wet springs and dry summers, the passage of insects and the touch of fire, all of it written in the circles of its rings, patient and clear. And here is something that many people find quietly moving. When a tree is under stress, when it is dry, or insects are feeding on its leaves, or something is changing in its environment, it often sends out chemical signals into the air around it. Not a cry, not an alarm, just a slow diffusion of molecules that drift toward neighboring plants on the breeze. Other plants nearby can detect these signals and begin to prepare themselves. They might produce slightly stronger leaf compounds. They might shift resources. They respond in their own time, in their own way. It is not fear. It is not panic. It is more like how you might notice that a friend is tired today, and so you speak a little more softly and bring them a warm cup of something without being asked. The forest takes care of its own quietly on the wind. If this story is making you feel peaceful and curious, we would love it if you left a little comment below, even just to say hello or to share what part of nature you find most calming. We read everyone, and your thoughts make this community feel like a garden of its own. And if you haven't already, there are more stories just like this one waiting for you in our playlist, Soft Stories for Soft Evenings. Now, let your eyes grow heavier. Let the idea of a forest breathing around you be the last clear thought you hold. In the next part of our story, we are going to go deeper beneath the soil into the extraordinary network that connects trees across entire forests. But for now, just breathe and let the quiet language of plants carry you toward sleep. In every forest, beneath every layer of fallen leaves and soft, dark soil, there is something that no eye can see, but that almost every tree depends upon. Something so widespread, so intricate, so lovingly interconnected, that scientists who first described it reached for a comparison we all understand: the internet. They called it the Wood Wide Web. It is not made of wires or light. It is made of fungi. Fungi are extraordinary living things. They are not plants, and they are not animals. They exist in their own kingdom, ancient and patient, threading through the world in ways that are almost magical once you begin to understand them. The part of a fungus that you sometimes see, a mushroom in the grass, a shelf of pale growth on a fallen log, is only a tiny fraction of the whole organism. Most of the fungus lives underground as a vast net of hair-thin threads called hyphae. These threads are so fine you cannot see a single one without a microscope. But together, woven through the soil in every direction, they form something immense. And trees, it turns out, have been living in partnership with these fungi for hundreds of millions of years, since long before the first flowers bloomed, since long before the first birds sang. The relationship is called mycorrhizal, a word from the Greek for fungus and root. And it is one of the most important partnerships on Earth. Here is how it works, as simply as possible. The fungal threads wrap themselves around the tips of tree roots, or in some cases enter the root cells themselves, creating a connection that is intimate and gentle. The tree shares with the fungus sugars that it makes through photosynthesis, sweet gifts of sunlight converted to food and offered downward into the soil. And in return, the fungus extends its vast network outward, gathering water and minerals from the soil and passing them back to the tree. The fungus can reach into spaces that roots cannot. It covers ground that would take years for roots alone to explore. Together, tree and fungus accomplish more than either could alone. But the Wood Wide Web is more than just a feeding arrangement. It is a channel, a pathway through which materials and even chemical signals can pass from one tree to another. Trees that are connected to the same fungal network can, in a real and measurable way, share resources with one another. Imagine a young tree, newly sprouted, small and in the shade. Its leaves cannot reach the sunlight above the canopy yet. It is producing less food than it needs. On its own, it might struggle for years, growing only slowly, vulnerable to drought or disease. But if it is connected to the Wood Wide Web, linked by fungal threads to the older trees nearby, then something remarkable can happen. The older trees, with their great canopies full of sunlight, may send sugars down through the network to the young tree, feeding it, supporting its early growth. like a hand extended in the dark, a quiet transfer of nourishment from the old to the young. This is not a theory. Scientists have been able to trace this flow of carbon, tagged with a special marker, from older trees to seedlings through the fungal web. It has been measured, documented, and confirmed. The forest feeds its young. In certain forests, researchers have found that one tree in a grove may be connected to hundreds of its neighbors through this fungal network. The oldest and largest trees, sometimes called mother trees, often sit at the center of the most complex networks, like a hub from which dozens of threads radiate outward. These trees seem to recognize seedlings of their own species and channel more support to them. The forest, in its ancient wordless way, knows its own. Let that feeling settle into you like warmth. You are resting now, and somewhere in a forest, perhaps closer than you think, the trees are sharing their quiet abundance with one another. The night does not slow them. The dark does not stop the subtle movement of nutrients along the web. It continues, steady and generous, through every hour. The wood wide web can also carry warning signals. When a tree is attacked by insects feeding on its leaves, for example, it may release chemical compounds through the air, yes, but also through the soil, through the fungal network. The signal moves along the threads, slowly but surely, to neighboring trees. And those neighboring trees, receiving the signal, begin to produce their own protective compounds, not because anything is attacking them yet, but because they have been told, because the forest communicates. There is something deeply peaceful about this when you sit with it. The trees do not fight. They do not argue or rush. They simply tell each other what they know through the only language they have, the language of chemistry, of light, of the slow movement of living things through the soil. Even in death, trees contribute to this network. A fallen log, decomposing on the forest floor, does not simply vanish. It becomes a source of nutrients that feed the fungi and, through them, the living trees nearby. The nutrients locked inside the dead wood return to the soil slowly over years and decades and are taken up again by new life. The forest recycles everything. Nothing is wasted. Every ending is also a beginning, quiet and unremarked, happening beneath the moss and the fallen leaves. Do leave us a little comment if you are enjoying this journey through the forest. It means so much to know you are here, resting and listening along with us. And our full playlist of sleepy nature stories is always there for you, a whole collection of these gentle night walks through the natural world. Close your eyes a little more now. Feel your breath, slow and even. Picture the threads of the wood-wide web stretching out beneath a still, moonlit forest. Picture the trees standing in the dark, connected, patient, holding one another up in ways you would never guess just by looking. The forest rests, and so can you. Now we rise up from the soil and into the air, and you will find that the language of plants does not end at the ground. Far from it. Above the surface, in the warm space between leaf and sky, plants are sending messages on the wind. This kind of communication happens through chemicals called volatile organic compounds. But we do not need to hold on to those long words. Just think of them as plant perfumes, because that is essentially what they are. Fragrant molecules released into the air, drifting on the breeze, carrying information from one plant to another, sometimes from one plant to an insect, sometimes from one forest edge to another meadow entirely. You already know this language, actually. You have smelled it many times. The scent of freshly cut grass, that clean, sharp, green smell that rises up when a lawnmower passes, or when you tear a handful of stems from a meadow, is one of the most recognizable plant communications there is. When grass blades are cut or damaged, they immediately release a specific blend of compounds into the air. Scientists believe this serves several purposes. It may attract natural predators of whatever insect is causing damage. It may signal to neighboring grass plants to begin producing their own defensive compounds, and it may even call in certain helpful insects that the plant has, in a sense, learned to invite. The smell of cut grass, then, is not just beautiful. It is a conversation. A quiet emergency broadcast carried on the summer air, reaching everyone nearby. Flowers, of course, are among the most eloquent speakers in the plant world. Their scents are not random or decorative. Each fragrance is a carefully composed message aimed at specific receivers. The sweetness of a rose is a love letter to bees, written in a language of nectar and pollen. The heavy, almost heady perfume of jasmine at night is meant for moths, which fly after dark and need a stronger signal to follow. The faint, subtle scent of certain orchids mimics the pheromones of specific insects, drawing them in with an almost extraordinary precision. And then there are the flowers that smell of things quite different from perfume, of decay, of overripe fruit, of something warm and organic, because the creatures they wish to attract are flies or beetles, and those are the messages that speak most clearly to a fly. Not beautiful to us, perhaps, but perfectly right for the receiver. This is one of the things that can fill you with quiet wonder if you let it. There is no waste in the natural world. Every signal is calibrated. Every message has an intended audience. The plants have been composing these signals for millions of years, adjusting and refining through countless generations, until each scent is almost perfectly matched to the creature that carries its pollen or disperses its seeds. It is the longest correspondence in the history of life on Earth, between plant and animal, between flower and bee. And it has been continuing in soft, fragrant silence long before the first human stood in a meadow and breathed in, wondering what that beautiful smell could be. Trees, too, release chemical signals into the air when threatened. This was famously observed in studies of acacia trees on the African savanna, when giraffes began to browse on the leaves of one tree. That tree released a compound into the air. Downwind acacias, detecting the compound, began producing higher levels of tannin in their leaves, a substance that makes the leaves taste bitter and unpleasant. The giraffes, over time, learned to move upwind to find trees that hadn't yet received the message. They discovered the communication before the scientists did. There are similar observations from other forests. Pine trees under attack by beetles send signals that their neighbors seem to receive. Oak trees infested with caterpillars produce chemical signals that waft toward other oaks, which respond by increasing their own defenses. It is not instantaneous. It takes time, hours, sometimes days, for the signals to travel and for the receiving plants to respond. But it happens reliably over and over in forests around the world. Picture yourself standing in a pine forest on a warm afternoon, the air full of that deep, resinous scent that pine trees carry. Part of that scent is the tree simply breathing, releasing its everyday compounds as a product of photosynthesis. But part of it may be communication. The forest, perpetually in conversation with itself, using the air as its medium, the breeze as its postal system. The compounds that plants release can also communicate with creatures other than insects. Some plants release chemicals that attract birds through smell or through the color signals that accompany fruit ripening. When a fruit turns red or purple and begins to emit sweet volatiles, it is broadcasting a message to birds and mammals with extraordinary precision. I am ready. Come and eat me. Take my seeds somewhere new. Even more astonishing, some plants release underground chemicals that attract specific bacteria or fungi to their root zone. They call their partners to them through the soil with chemical invitations. The bacteria arrive and begin fixing nitrogen from the air, making it available to the plant in a form it can use. The plant has essentially called in a favor, sent out an invitation, and the guest has arrived. It is an ancient system of mutual benefit, operating in the dark beneath our feet, fragrant and precise. We hope this story is settling you gently into the evening. If you feel like it, drop us a comment. Tell us your favorite plant scent, or just say hello. And if you haven't found our playlist yet, there is a whole world of these soft stories waiting for you there, ready for any night you need a little calm. Take a slow breath now. Really breathe in, as if you are standing in that pine forest, and the warm afternoon air is full of the quiet conversations of trees. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. The air is full of messages tonight. Most of them mean all is well. Grow. Rest. The sun will come again tomorrow. There is a question that seems almost too gentle to be scientific, and yet researchers have asked it very seriously and found the most tender answers. Can a plant recognize its own family? The answer, it seems, is yes. Not in the way you and I recognize a face or hear a familiar voice, but in a quiet, biochemical way. Plants, and trees especially, can distinguish their own genetic relatives from strangers. And when they do, they often behave differently, more generously. This discovery came through a series of careful experiments. Scientists grew plants in containers, pairing them with either genetic siblings, seeds from the same parent plant, or unrelated strangers of the same species. When planted with strangers, plants often grew their roots more aggressively, spreading out to claim as much soil as possible, absorbing water and nutrients competitively. But when planted with siblings, the same plants were calmer. Their roots stayed more contained. They competed less. They seemed to understand in some chemical way that the plant beside them was family, and the aggressive scramble for resources was unnecessary. What signal do they use to recognize one another? Researchers believe it happens partly through root exudates, the tiny quantities of chemicals that roots release into the surrounding soil. Each plant releases its own blend of these compounds, and plants can sense the exudates of nearby roots. Whether the neighboring plant is a sibling or a stranger may be detectable from subtle differences in this chemical signature. It is, in a sense, a family scent, an underground recognition. The idea of kinship in trees takes on particular beauty when you consider mother trees again. A large old tree, perhaps a spruce or a Douglas fir standing at the center of a forest, may have seedlings growing beneath it that are its own offspring. Dropped seeds, fallen in previous seasons, now small trees reaching upward. Research has found that through the mycorrhizal network, mother trees may provide these seedlings with more carbon than they provide to unrelated young trees nearby. They direct more of their gifts toward their own young. And when a mother tree is dying, when it is damaged by insects, or when it has reached the end of its long life, something remarkable may happen. It may release a larger surge of carbon and nutrients into the network before it falls. A kind of bequest. A last generous act. The carbon that has been locked in the tree's wood for 100 years or more flows outward through the fungal web to the young trees, to the forest. The dying tree gives away everything it has. You do not need to make anything of this beyond what it is. A biological process, beautiful and true. But if you let yourself feel the poetry of it, the image of an old tree giving its last resources to its children and the young forest around it, it carries a kind of tenderness that can make the whole world feel a little softer. Let that feeling rest in your chest like a warm hand. The world, even in its wild and wordless places, is full of care. Trees also recognize the season, and their communication changes with it. As autumn approaches and light begins to shift, the days growing shorter, the angle of the sun lower in the sky, trees begin to prepare for winter. Nutrients are drawn back from the leaves into the branches and trunk, stored safely for the cold months ahead. This is part of why leaves change color. The green chlorophyll breaks down and is reabsorbed, revealing the yellows and oranges that were always present underneath, just masked by the green. The tree takes back what it needs. The color show is, in a way, the aftermath of a very quiet and efficient act of conservation. And before the first frost, the tree adjusts its cells. Water moves within cells in ways that prevent ice damage. Certain protective compounds are produced. The tree does not panic at the coming cold. It has lived through hundreds of them. it simply begins, gradually and patiently, to prepare. The seasonal preparation of a tree is another form of communication with time itself. A long, responsive conversation with the rhythm of the year. Even the rings inside a tree trunk tell this story. From a 1,000-year-old tree contains 1,000 lines of autobiography. You can read drought, years, and wet years. You can see the wide rings of good growing seasons and the narrow rings of stress. The tree has been writing its own history, one ring at a time, in total silence. Take a moment right now and imagine a very old tree, centuries old, standing in some quiet forest or churchyard or hillside you might have visited once. Think of the rings inside its trunk, each one a year, each year a season of light and dark, rain and sun. The tree has been there, breathing and growing and communicating with everything around it for longer than any living person can remember. There is something enormously calming about old trees. Their patience is contagious. Spending time near a very old tree, and many people notice this without knowing why, has a settling effect on the nervous system. You slow down. You breathe more deeply. You feel, without quite articulating it, that this thing beside you has survived everything and is still here, still reaching toward the light, still generously providing shade and oxygen and shelter to whatever needs it. Plants, ultimately, are extraordinarily patient communicators. Their messages take hours, days, sometimes seasons to arrive and be answered. They are in no rush. They do not need the conversation to go quickly. They are rooted in time the way their roots are in the ground, deeply, thoroughly, with no desire to be anywhere other than exactly where they are. Perhaps that patience is something we can borrow, just a little, as we settle into sleep. Let the conversation slow. Let the messages arrive in their own time. You are here, rooted for now, and all the rest can wait until morning. We go back underground now, into the warm darkness of the soil, and this time we look at roots more closely. Because roots, it turns out, do things that seem almost impossible, almost like thinking. Roots grow toward water. This has been known for a long time. A root in dry soil will change its direction of growth to follow a moisture gradient, moving toward wetter soil the way a compass needle swings toward north. But what was not appreciated until recently is how sensitive this navigation is and how many different signals the root must be processing at the same time to do it. A root tip, the growing end of a root about the size of a grain of sand, contains cells that are among the most responsive and sensitive in the plant kingdom. These cells can detect gravity, so the root always knows which direction is down. They can detect moisture, so the root always knows where water is. They can detect the presence of chemicals in the soil, nutrients, signals from fungi, exudates from neighboring roots, traces of salt or acid that might harm the plant. They can detect mechanical resistance, the texture of soil, the presence of a stone, the compaction of the earth, and adjust the direction of growth accordingly. and they do all of this simultaneously. The root tip is constantly integrating multiple streams of information and adjusting its growth accordingly. It curves around obstacles. It bends toward water. It slows down in harsh conditions and speeds up in welcoming ones. It navigates through a dark, complex, three-dimensional environment with a precision that continues to amaze researchers. Some scientists have proposed that the root tip functions something like a brain. Not a brain in the way we have brains, with neurons and consciousness and thoughts, but a processing center where information arrives, is integrated, and results in a decision. The comparison is imperfect, and many scientists are cautious about using such human words for plant behavior. But the parallel is hard to ignore. The philosopher in you might pause here for a moment. What is thought exactly? What is intelligence? Is it only something that happens in a skull, in the dark, behind eyes? Or could it be something more distributed, more patient, more rooted in the physical world? There are no easy answers, and that is actually rather wonderful. The questions themselves are beautiful. What is clear is this: roots are not passive. They are not just tubes absorbing whatever the soil provides. They are active, responsive, continuously exploring and evaluating and choosing. A root system is alive in a very dynamic sense, growing, responding, communicating, failing, and trying again in new directions. Every day, every hour, in every garden and field and forest floor, roots are doing this work with quiet, unceasing dedication. The total length of root systems is staggering. A single rye plant, a small grain crop, has been carefully measured to have a root system with a total length of over 600 kilometers. All of those fine threads packed into a volume of soil not much larger than a shoebox. Stretched end to end, that single small plant's roots would reach from one large city to another. And the root surface area, the total surface through which nutrients and water are absorbed, is even more vast. A tree with a large root system has a surface area of absorption that would cover many swimming pools. All of that surface is alive, sensitive, and in continuous communication with the soil. The soil itself, of course, is full of life. A single teaspoon of healthy garden soil contains more individual bacteria than there are people on Earth. Many billions of organisms, too small to see, living, feeding, dying, and in doing so, making the soil rich and alive. The roots of plants move through this living world, releasing and receiving signals constantly, negotiating and cooperating with the microscopic community around them. When a plant needs more of a particular nutrient, its roots can release specific compounds that attract bacteria capable of making that nutrient available. The bacteria respond to the invitation, multiply in the root zone, and begin their work. The plant then absorbs the products of their labor. This is farming of a kind. Chemical farming, patient and precise, happening in the dark where no one is watching. Legumes, peas, beans, clover are particularly famous for this kind of relationship. Their roots form partnerships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which the plant houses in small nodules on the root surface. the bacteria take nitrogen from the air in the soil spaces and convert it into ammonia, which the plant can use. In return, the plant provides the bacteria with sugars and shelter. Farmers have known for centuries that planting legumes improves the soil for other crops. This was the wisdom behind crop rotation, which was practiced long before anyone understood the bacteria involved. This is the warmth of the plant world. Knowledge accumulated and applied, relationships maintained across generations. The legume and its bacteria have been farming together for more than 100 million years, long before there were human farmers, long before there were fields. They found each other in the early earth and have been cooperating ever since. If you are still awake and enjoying this story, we would love it if you shared it with someone who might enjoy a quiet evening like this one. And if you haven't yet wandered through our playlist, there are many more nights like this one waiting there, full of the gentle, extraordinary world of nature. Let your breathing continue to slow. Feel the weight of your body resting, held. Imagine being a root moving through the dark, warm soil, finding everything you need, following the pull of water, surrounded by millions of busy, beneficent microbes doing their ancient work. There is nothing to worry about down here. The soil is warm, the water is close, the world is full of helpers. We come back up now, up through the soil, up past the roots and the stems, and we open our eyes slowly, gently, into the world of flowers. Flowers are perhaps the most vivid and most obvious communication of the plant world. They are messages written in color and scent and shape, meant to be read by creatures with eyes and noses and the ability to fly or walk from flower to flower. And every detail of a flower, every petal, every pattern, every shade and fragrance is part of the message. Consider the color of petals. To us, a yellow flower is simply yellow, but bees see differently. Bees can see ultraviolet light, which is invisible to human eyes, and many flowers have ultraviolet patterns on their petals, lines and dots and rings that are invisible to us, but brilliantly clear to a bee. These patterns are called nectar guides, roads and arrows painted in ultraviolet light, pointing the way to the flower's center where the nectar and pollen wait. The flower is a landing pad, and it has been painted with directions for its specific visitors. Some flowers have patterns that look to a bee like another bee, or like the body of a female insect. Certain orchids have evolved this mimicry to extraordinary precision, imitating not just the shape, but the scent of a specific insect species. Male insects are drawn to the flower, attempt to mate with it, and in doing so, pick up pollen, which they then carry to the next flower. The plant has done something remarkable. It has learned over millions of years to speak the language of desire. It offers no nectar, no reward at all, just a perfect copy of something the insect already wants. It is a beautiful deception, entirely without malice, carried out in the soft light of spring meadows. The timing of flowers is itself a kind of communication with the season, with the sun, with the creatures they depend upon. Spring flowers bloom before the leaves of trees fill in, while sunlight reaches the forest floor. Summer flowers bloom when long days and warm temperatures bring out the greatest diversity of pollinators. Autumn flowers bloom to catch the last of the summer's insects before the cold comes. Each species has found its own moment in the year, its own window in the light, and flowers only then, spending the rest of the year in preparation. Night-blooming flowers are among the most quietly magical things in the plant world. Imagine a garden at midnight, dark and still. Most of the daytime flowers are closed, their petals folded inward, resting, conserving moisture. But here and there, white flowers have opened wide in the dark. Evening primrose, night-blooming jasmine, moonflower. Their white petals catch whatever light the moon and stars provide, glowing faintly in the dark, and their fragrance, far stronger than their daytime counterparts, drifts on the cool night air. They are broadcasting to moths. Moths navigate by scent and by light, and these pale, fragrant flowers are perfectly designed to attract them. The flower gives up nectar, the moth carries pollen. The exchange happens in the quiet of night, while most of the world is sleeping. The garden is never truly asleep. Something is always in conversation, even in the dark hours. The shape of a flower is also a message. Long tubular flowers are speaking to hummingbirds and certain butterflies, whose tongues and beaks are long enough to reach the nectar at the bottom of the tube. Wide, open flowers with flat platforms are speaking to beetles and large bumblebees who need a landing surface. Flowers with lips and complex structures are speaking to specific bees that are the right shape to push inside and collect the pollen tucked within. Every flower is a lock, and every pollinator is a key. Or, more beautifully, every flower is a door, and it knows exactly who it is opening for. Some plants invest extraordinary energy in their flowers for just a few hours or days. A cactus that blooms only at night, only once a year for a single night, opens its enormous flower in the dark, spreads its fragrance through the desert air, is visited by a bat or a hawk moth, and then closes as the sun rises, never to bloom again that year. The whole year's effort, all the water conserved, all the energy stored, goes into that one night of opening. One message sent, one conversation completed. And then there are flowers that have been in conversation with the same pollinator for so long that neither can survive without the other. The fig tree and the fig wasp, the yucca plant and the yucca moth. These pairings are so specific, so ancient, so intertwined, that the extinction of one would mean the extinction of the other. They are bound together by millions of years of mutual communication, mutual dependence. Not quite separate organisms in a way, more like the two halves of a single long sentence. You might feel, as you think about all of this, a kind of deep appreciation for the wild cleverness and patience of the living world. Nothing is accident. Every color, every shape, every drift of fragrance on the evening air is a message that has been refined across vast stretches of time. The flower on your windowsill, the wild rose at the edge of the path, the dandelion pushing through pavement. Each one is a letter written in a language much older than ours, sent to a reader who has been waiting for it since before the first human walked the earth. Take a long, slow breath. Notice any perfume that might be in the air near you right now. A candle, a soap, a garden breath through an open window. Think of it as a small version of this ancient conversation. Molecules drifting on the air, carrying meaning. Let that thought be soft and simple and pleasant. You are doing wonderfully. Just keep resting. There is a plant called Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant, or touch-me-not. And if you have ever had the chance to touch its leaves, you will never forget it. The tiny leaflets, arranged along delicate stems like the smallest feathers, fold inward when touched. Not slowly, not gradually, but quickly. Within a second, the whole compound leaf closes up and droops, as if the plant has drawn in a breath and held it. Wait a few minutes, and the leaves reopen, soft and green as before, as if nothing happened. This is not a mechanical trick. It is a genuine response, mediated by cells at the base of each leaflet that can rapidly change their water pressure. When touched, a signal travels along the stem, not through nerves, as it would in an animal, but through changes in electrical potential flowing from cell to cell. The signal spreads. The leaves respond. Scientists have studied this response carefully and found something that makes it even more remarkable. Mimosa pudica can learn. In experiments where the plants were repeatedly dropped in a harmless way, allowing researchers to observe whether the plant kept closing its leaves in response or eventually stopped. The plants that were dropped many times eventually stopped reacting. They learned in some sense that the repeated disturbance was not harmful, and they stopped spending energy on the response. And this learned behavior persisted for weeks. Even after the experiment ended, the plant remembered. A plant with no brain, no neurons, no nervous system, learned from experience and remembered what it learned. This is the kind of discovery that makes scientists smile and pause and look at the world with slightly wider eyes. Plants are sensitive to touch in many quieter ways too. Trees growing in windy locations develop thicker, stronger trunks than the same species growing in sheltered spots. The swaying produced by wind triggers the production of special compounds in the wood that increase its strength and density. Trees grown in greenhouses without wind develop weak, spindly trunks. Move them outside, and the wind begins to strengthen them. Some gardeners even gently shake their seedlings or brush them with their hands to mimic this effect. The plants respond to touch by becoming more resilient. There is something gently poetic in that. What bends you also strengthens you. If the bending is not beyond what you can bear, the tree knows this in its wood. It writes resilience into its cells, ring by ring, because of every wind that passed through. Now, sound. Does sound affect plants? This is an area where science is careful and the evidence is still gathering. But what has been found is intriguing. Some studies suggest that plants can respond to vibrations in their range, including the specific vibrations created by certain pollinators. A primrose, it was found, can detect the vibration of a bee's wing frequency and within minutes increase the sugar content of its nectar, not when exposed to other vibrations, only to the frequency of bee wings. The flower was listening, and when it heard the sound it had been waiting for, it made itself sweeter. Could not otherwise detect the water's presence through moisture gradients. They were drawn by the vibration. The root heard the water before it tasted it. Plants are also sensitive to light in ways far beyond simple photosynthesis. Many plants can detect the direction of light and orient their growth accordingly, a process called phototropism. Sunflowers famously follow the sun across the sky during their early growth stages, their stems bending to keep the flower facing the light. This tracking happens through a careful redistribution of hormones within the stem. The cells on the shaded side grow faster, bending the stem toward the light. It is a constant, living adjustment, a slow dance with the sun across the long summer days. At night, young sunflowers reorient themselves, swinging back to face east overnight, ready for the morning. Older sunflowers, once they are fully grown, stop tracking and simply face east permanently, where the morning sun comes from. The warmth of the east-facing flower, researchers found, is a signal to pollinators. This flower is warm and ready. Bees prefer the warmer flowers in the morning. Once again, the plant has adjusted its behavior, this time its orientation, to serve as communication. The sensitivity of plants extends even to gravity. Roots grow down because they can feel gravity. They have special cells containing heavy starch grains that settle to the bottom of the cell under gravity's pull, and this settling tells the root which direction is down. Shoots grow up for the same reason, in reverse. They grow away from the direction in which those same grains settle. Astronauts have grown plants in space and found that without gravity, the roots and shoots lose their directional certainty. The plants grow in curving, exploratory tangles, unsure of up and down for the first time in the history of their species. Even that is beautiful in a way. The plant searching for a direction it has never had to search for before, reaching out in every direction at once, trying to find an orientation in an orientationless world. Let your own body feel its orientation now. Feel the weight of yourself against wherever you are lying or sitting. Gravity holds you gently, firmly. You're going nowhere but deeper into rest. The sensitive plant folds its leaves and rests. The sunflower faces east and waits for morning. You, too, are in the right position, in the right place, settling softly toward sleep. Some of the conversations plants have been having are so old that it is almost impossible to hold the full weight of their age. We are going to try, quietly and gently, because there is something very calming about truly ancient things, something that makes the concerns of a single human day feel very small and manageable and safe. Plants have been on Earth for approximately 500 million years. The first land plants were simple, small, a little like modern mosses, hugging the wet surfaces of rocks near ancient waterways, making do in a world that was mostly bare stone and shallow sea. There were no flowers then, no fruits, no trees, just these quiet pioneers beginning the long, slow work of covering the land with green. The conversations they were having were very simple at first. The exchange of signals between root and soil, the release of compounds into the water, the basic negotiation with early microbes for nutrients. But even in those earliest days, the fundamental language was already there. The chemistry of communication that plants still use today was already being written. Over hundreds of millions of years, as plants evolved and diversified and filled every possible corner of the land, their communications became more complex. Flowers appeared and entered into conversation with insects that were themselves evolving in response. Trees grew tall and began their underground networks. Fruit-bearing plants entered into their long relationship with the animals that would carry their seeds. Each new kind of plant brought new conversations, new partnerships, new signals added to the ever-growing vocabulary of the living world. The conversations between plants and fungi are particularly old, older than flowers, older than insects, older even than the first trees. The mycorrhizal partnership is thought to have been established approximately 450 million years ago, around the time plants first moved onto land. From almost the very beginning of terrestrial life, plants and fungi have been working together, building the networks that make complex ecosystems possible. What we see today in the Wood Wide Web is the modern expression of a partnership that is nearly 500 million years old. 500 million years. Let that be very quiet and very large in your mind for a moment. The oak tree in a park, the spruce in a mountain forest, the small maple seedling pushing up through the leaf litter, all of them are participants in a conversation that began before the first dinosaur walked the earth. They inherited the language. They speak it without effort, without teaching, because it is written into them at the deepest possible level. And you, resting here tonight, are part of a world where these conversations are happening continuously. You breathe oxygen that was made by plants. This is perhaps the most direct communication between plant and animal, the most intimate exchange. Plants take in carbon dioxide that animals breathe out and return oxygen. You and the tree outside are, in the most literal sense, breathing each other. The conversation is not abstract or metaphorical. It is happening in your lungs right now, with every breath. There is a particular kind of old tree that carries this sense of ancient time most powerfully, the bristlecone pine. These trees grow in the White Mountains of California and a few other high remote places. They grow slowly and with enormous difficulty in poor rocky soil at high elevation, battered by wind and cold. And because of this difficulty, they become extraordinary. The oldest known bristlecone pine has been living for more than 5,000 years. It was already old when the pyramids of Egypt were being built. It was ancient when the first libraries were established. It stands today on a windswept slope, twisted and storm-carved and deeply alive, still growing its 1 millimeter of new wood each year. What has that tree communicated in its 5 millennia? How many fungal partners has it maintained? How many seasons has it tracked? How many droughts endured? How many brief alpine summers has it used to add its ring of pale wood to the record of its long life? The tree does not know its own age. It simply grows and responds and communicates with the world around it, as it has always done, as plants have always done, since long before any of this had a name. We are humbled by that, or we should be, gently and without anxiety, humbled in the way that standing at the edge of the ocean at night is humbling, not frightening, just vast, larger than our daily concerns, older than our worries, more patient than our impatience. If you feel a small impulse to leave a comment on this video, maybe just sharing what ancient tree you would most like to sit beside, please do. Those small connections between us, like the threads of the wood wide web, make this whole channel feel alive. And if you are new here, the playlist is full of nights like this one. Rest now in the thought of deep time. The conversations that were ancient before your great-great-grandparents were born are still happening right now in every forest and meadow and garden. The world is very old, and it has been very much alive the whole time. You are safe and cradled in something enormously continuous. Let your breathing be easy. Let your mind release its grip on the day. The oldest conversations do not need your attention. They have been ongoing without you and will continue. You can simply rest alongside them, as peaceful and unhurried as a very old tree on a quiet slope. There is a smell that almost everyone recognizes and almost everyone loves, even if they cannot always name it. It is the smell of rain on dry earth, that clean, deep, green, earthy fragrance that rises from the ground when the first drops of a summer shower fall on soil that has been warm and dry. It is one of the most universal and comforting smells in the world. That smell has a name, petrichor, and it is itself a form of plant communication in the very broadest sense. Part of petrichor comes from compounds that plants release into the soil during dry periods, chemical substances that build up in the earth when there is no rain to wash them away. When rain finally comes, these compounds are released into the air along with tiny droplets of soil water, creating the fragrance we know so well. And part of it comes from a compound produced by soil bacteria, geosmin, which we can smell at extraordinarily low concentrations. Our noses are more sensitive to geosmin than almost any other substance. Some scientists believe this sensitivity evolved because the smell of rain on Earth was, for our ancient ancestors, a critically important signal. Water is coming. Life is about to return. Follow this smell to find where the land is wet. We are, in a sense, responding to a communication that the earth has been sending to animals for hundreds of millions of years. The smell of petrichor is not just pleasant, it is ancient. It is the earth saying, rain is here. Everything will be all right. Soil itself, seen up close, is one of the most complex environments on Earth. A cubic centimeter of healthy topsoil, about the size of a small dice, contains several kilometers of fungal threads, hundreds of thousands of nematodes, tiny roundworms, countless millions of bacteria, and enormous numbers of protozoa, mites, springtails, and other organisms too small or too numerous to count. All of them living, feeding, communicating, making the soil what it is: warm, dark, full of possibility. Plants communicate with all of these creatures. Their roots release exudates, sugars, amino acids, enzymes that are essentially a form of selective hospitality. Different plants attract different communities of microbes through different root exudates. A tomato plant calls a different crowd to its root zone than a clover or an oak. Each plant creates, through its own chemistry, a particular microbiome in the soil immediately around it, a customized community of helpers assembled through millions of years of coevolution and maintained through the continuous release of chemical invitations. This community around the roots is called the rhizosphere, and it buzzes with a kind of invisible, silent activity that makes the soil feel almost warm when you push your hands into it on a good garden day. Gardeners who love their soil are, without always knowing it, sensing this life. The crumbliness, the smell, the warmth of good soil. All of these are expressions of an active, richly communicating underground world. Rain changes everything in the rhizosphere. When water soaks down through the soil after a dry spell, it carries oxygen with it, changing the chemistry of the soil environment. Microbes that have been dormant in the dryness become active. Nutrients that were locked in dry soil become soluble and available. The roots sense the change and respond, increasing nutrient uptake, producing signals for the fungal network that conditions have improved, adjusting their own chemistry in ways that reflect the new abundance. A plant after rain has a different quality than a plant in drought. Not just visually, not just in the lifted leaves and the green that seems to deepen, but chemically. The plant is producing different compounds, sending different signals, operating at a different level of engagement with the world around it. Rain does not just water a plant, it changes its conversation. Think of a garden after a long summer shower. The light is soft and silver gray. The air is cool and full of that deep, satisfying fragrance. Every leaf is spangled with drops that catch the light. The ground is soft and giving underfoot. Everything seems more present, more vivid, more awake. What is actually happening in that garden in those moments after rain is a shift in thousands of simultaneous conversations. The roots engaging with newly mobile nutrients. The fungal threads carrying water through the network. The bacteria waking from their dry sleep and beginning their work. The plants releasing compounds in response to the new conditions. The earthworms surfacing where the soil is saturated. The insects emerging for the brief richness of the wet afternoon. It is a whole world readjusting itself, and the fragrance you breathe in is part of that world reaching you. You are never outside this conversation. Breathing, drinking water, eating food that grew in soil, you are continuously part of the exchange. Your body, too, is made of elements that pass through soil, through plants, through rainfall and sunlight. The carbon in your breath was photosynthesized from the air by some plant somewhere and entered you when you ate. The water in your cells has been cycled through rain and river and root and leaf more times than anyone can count. This is not a heavy thought. It is a light one. It means that you are not separate from the natural world looking in. You are part of it from the inside, as connected as any root in the rhizosphere, as much a part of the conversation as any tree in the forest. Close your eyes and feel that connection if it feels good. Let it be soft and warm, not profound or serious. Just the small, pleasant sense that you're woven into something much larger and that something is woven into you. The rain will come again, the soil will breathe again, and so will you tomorrow morning in good air made by the green and patient world. Plants are, among other things, extraordinary timekeepers, not with clocks or numbers, but with light and chemistry, with the sensitivity to measure the length of a day with a precision that would impress any watchmaker. This ability is called photoperiodism, and it governs some of the most spectacular and coordinated events in the plant world. The day length changes across the seasons. Longer days in summer, shorter days in winter. Plants can detect this change, often measuring not the length of daylight, but the length of darkness, which turns out to be more reliable for their purposes. Special photoreceptor molecules in plant cells absorb light and are transformed by it during the day. During the night, they slowly revert to their inactive form. By the time morning comes, the ratio of active to inactive forms tells the plant, in effect, how long the night was. And from this, the plant knows. Is it midsummer? Is autumn approaching? Is spring just beginning? This timing controls, among other things, when a plant decides to flower. Long day plants, like spinach or some varieties of wheat, flower when days are longer than a threshold. They wait for summer. Short day plants, chrysanthemums, certain poinsettias, flower when days become shorter than their threshold. They bloom in autumn. Day-neutral plants, tomatoes, roses, are less sensitive to day length and bloom, according to other cues. The diversity of strategies ensures that the flowering season extends across the entire year, giving pollinators food at all times and filling the world with color from earliest spring to latest autumn. The coordination of this timing across a population is part of what makes it so interesting. When cherry trees bloom, they do not bloom one by one over many weeks. They bloom together within a remarkably tight window, often just a few days. All the trees in a region synchronized by the same accumulated warmth and day-length cues. The effect is famous and celebrated. The brief, beautiful storm of cherry blossoms that sweeps across the land every spring as if the trees had arranged it by appointment. They have, in a sense. The appointment was kept through the slow accumulation of warmth hours and light hours over weeks and months, every tree doing its own quiet calculation, and all of them arriving at nearly the same answer on nearly the same morning. A coordinated message: spring is here. Come now. The flowering window is open. Some plants have internal clocks so precise that they were used by the botanist Carl Linnaeus to create what he called a floral clock, a garden arranged so that different flowers opened at different times of day, allowing him to read the approximate hour by which flowers were open and which were closed. Morning glory opens at dawn. Dandelions open mid-morning. 4 o'clock flowers open in the afternoon, as their name suggests. Evening primrose opens at dusk. Each species keeping its own appointment, its own window of conversation with the day. The mechanism behind these daily rhythms is called the circadian clock, and it exists in virtually every living thing studied, in animals, in fungi, in bacteria, in plants. The basic molecular machinery of the circadian clock is so similar across all these different forms of life that scientists believe it evolved once, very early in the history of life, and has been maintained ever since. The same timekeeping mechanism that tells you when to feel sleepy, when to feel hungry, when to feel most alert. A version of that same mechanism exists in every plant that has ever opened a flower toward the morning sun. Isn't that something to hold gently for a moment? The circadian rhythm that is pulling you toward sleep right now, making your eyelids heavy and your thoughts softer. It is kin to something in every plant, in every tree, in the moss on a stone, and the lichen on a wall. All of us in our different ways, keeping time, answering to the rhythm of the spinning earth. Some plants count the cold. Many fruit trees and flowering bulbs, tulips, daffodils, apple trees, pears, require a period of cold temperatures before they will bloom. This is called vernalization, and it prevents these plants from blooming during a warm spell in autumn, only to be destroyed by the true winter that follows. The plant, in a sense, refuses to believe in spring until it has first experienced enough winter. Only after the required number of cold hours have accumulated will the plant allow itself to flower. This cold counting is another remarkable form of plant memory. The accumulated hours of cold are recorded in the plant's chemistry, specifically through changes in the way certain genes are expressed, and the record persists even as temperatures rise again. The plant knows it has lived through winter. It has measured the winter and stored the answer. Now it is ready for spring. Gardeners in warm climates who want to grow tulips sometimes have to cheat this system, keeping their bulbs in the refrigerator for several weeks before planting to simulate the winter the bulbs did not experience outdoors. The bulb does not know the difference between a cold ground and a cold refrigerator shelf. Cold is cold. The chemistry responds the same way. The countdown begins. There is something gentle and reassuring about a world that operates on such patient rhythms. The plants are not in a hurry. They will not bloom until they are ready. They will not flower until they have counted their required hours. They trust the system, the ancient system of light and cold and the slow accumulation of seasonal cues, completely. And season after season, the system delivers. Spring comes, the blossom follows. Perhaps that is worth borrowing as you settle into sleep. The plants trust in the rhythm. You do not need to force rest. It comes in its own time, as spring comes in its own time, as flowers open in their own time. You have done your day's work. The darkness is doing its own work now, resetting, restoring, keeping the long, slow time of your body's night. You are in good hands. The rhythm knows what it is doing. For thousands of years, farmers and gardeners around the world have known something that science is only now fully explaining. Some plants do better when they grow together, not just tolerating each other's company, but actively benefiting from it, communicating in ways that improve the health, the yield, and the resilience of both. This is called companion planting, and it is one of the oldest and most beautiful examples of humans discovering plant communication long before they had the language to describe it. The most famous example is the Three Sisters, a combination of planting practiced by indigenous peoples of North America for centuries. The three plants are corn, beans, and squash, and they are grown together in the same mound of earth, each one contributing something the others need. The corn grows tall, providing a structure for the beans to climb. The beans, being legumes, fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, enriching the earth for both themselves and the corn. And the squash spreads its broad, prickly leaves across the ground, shading the soil to keep moisture in, discouraging weeds, and, some researchers suggest, the texture of the squash leaves may even discourage certain insects from landing. Three plants, three different contributions, woven together into something more productive and more resilient than any of them would be alone. The Three Sisters is a masterpiece of accumulated observation. Generations of growers noticed that these plants together produced better harvests than the plants grown separately. They did not know about nitrogen fixation or mycorrhizal networks. They simply watched over many harvests and learned. They learned by being present and patient, the way the plants themselves are present and patient. Marigolds are another celebrated companion plant. Grown near tomatoes, peppers, or cabbages, marigolds emit compounds from their roots and their leaves that repel certain nematodes, microscopic worms that damage root vegetables, and deter some common garden pests. The marigold is, in a chemical sense, broadcasting a signal on a frequency that pests find unpleasant. It is not doing this for the benefit of the vegetables beside it. It is simply expressing its own chemistry. But the effect is a kind of protective companionship. Lavender and rosemary, planted near vegetable beds, release volatile compounds that confuse or repel certain insects. Basil near tomatoes may improve the flavor of the tomatoes. Some gardeners swear by this, though the science is still investigating exactly how. Nasturtiums, planted at the edges of gardens, attract aphids preferentially. The aphids go to the nasturtiums and leave the vegetables alone. The nasturtium does not ask for this. It simply grows, and in growing, becomes a generous neighbor. All of this involves communication. The marigold's roots speaking to the nematodes, the lavender's leaves speaking to the insects, the nasturtium's color and chemistry speaking to the aphids, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the bean's root nodules speaking to the soil. Every relationship in a companion-planted garden involves an exchange of information, chemical, physical, biological, that has been refined over millions of years of coevolution. In traditional farming systems around the world, similar wisdom has accumulated. In Japan, certain combinations of plants and trees have been maintained in gardens for centuries. In West Africa, interplanting systems mix food crops with trees in ways that improve both. In the Andes, traditional potato farmers plant dozens of varieties together, creating a genetic and ecological diversity that makes the whole crop more resilient to disease and weather. The diversity itself is a kind of communication, a chorus of different signals that confuses pests, supports different soil communities, and weathers difficult seasons better than a single voice singing alone. Modern agriculture, which often grows single crops in enormous fields, monocultures, loses this diversity. The conversations that happen in a diverse planting are reduced to a single signal, repeated endlessly, and the soil and its inhabitants respond accordingly. One kind of chemistry, one kind of root exudate, one kind of mycorrhizal partner. The garden becomes, in a sense, a room where only one person is speaking over and over. It works for a time, but it is quieter and more fragile than the conversation of a diverse community. The rewilding movement, the effort to restore wild and diverse plant communities to farmland and disturbed ground, is, among other things, a restoration of conversation. As diverse plant communities are reestablished, the soil communities they support come back. The fungal networks rebuild. The insect communities diversify. The birds return. All of it is conversation, restarting, finding its old channels, and gradually filling them with life again. If you haven't explored our playlist yet, you'll find more stories exactly like this one, about forests and oceans and birds and rain. Each one is a long, soft, unhurried journey. We think you'll enjoy them, especially on an evening like this. And a comment from you, even a small one, means more than you might think. It tells us you're here and listening, and that keeps this little channel going. Think of the garden as you settle now, not a garden of effort and worry, just a garden in the soft evening light. Companions growing side by side, each one quietly contributing its own chemistry, its own scent, its own conversation to the whole. No plant is trying too hard. No plant is overwhelmed. Each one is simply being what it is, in the best place for it, alongside the right neighbors. You have done your day's work. Like the garden at dusk, you can now simply rest, surrounded by your own kind. Not all conversations in the plant world are large and dramatic. Some of the most beautiful communications happen in miniature, in the small, patient, ancient world of mosses and lichens. Mosses are among the oldest land plants. They appeared early in the history of terrestrial life, and they still carry the fundamental simplicity of that early era. They have no true roots, just small structures called rhizoids that anchor them to their surface. They have no conducting vessels to move water through their bodies, so they must live where moisture is available, on damp rocks, in the shade of trees, at the edges of streams. They absorb water and nutrients directly through their surfaces like very small sponges. A patch of moss is not a single organism. It is a community. Many individual moss plants growing so closely together that they form a soft, continuous carpet. And within this carpet, the individual plants communicate and cooperate. Their bodies interlock. Their water is shared. Their surfaces work together to maintain the humid microclimate that they all need. A patch of moss on a stone creates its own tiny world, slightly cooler, slightly more humid, slightly more sheltered than the bare stone beside it. Other organisms move in, small insects, mites, water bears, tiny creatures called tardigrades, which are extraordinarily resilient, bacteria, other mosses. The moss community, through simply existing and cooperating, creates conditions for more life. Mosses are extraordinarily patient. They can dry out completely, lose nearly all their moisture, and survive. Not dormant in any active sense, but suspended, waiting. When moisture returns, they rehydrate and resume living within hours. Some species have survived centuries in dried collections in museums, only to be rehydrated and resume growth. The patience of moss is not metaphorical. It is literal and absolute. Lichens take this patience even further. A lichen is not a single organism at all. It is a partnership between a fungus and an algae, and often bacteria, living in such close integration that they appear as a single entity. The fungus provides the physical structure, the protective outer layers, the attachment to the rock or bark. The algae provides food through photosynthesis, sharing its sugars with the fungus. The bacteria, in many lichens, fix nitrogen. Together, the three partners form something that neither could be separately. Lichens grow on surfaces that no other living thing can colonize. Bare rock, hot desert pavement, the Arctic ice-free surfaces, the shaded north faces of cemetery stones. They grow almost imperceptibly slowly, a millimeter a year for some species. A patch of lichen the size of your palm might be a century old. The oldest lichens in the world are estimated to be thousands of years old, and yet they are alive, continuous, patient, in constant quiet exchange between their component partners. The fungus and the algae and the bacteria have been having the same conversation for millennia, without pause, without drama. It is perhaps the quietest conversation in the living world. What do lichens communicate with the outside world? Their surfaces produce acids that slowly dissolve rock, releasing minerals into the environment. In doing so, they begin the process of soil formation, helping to break down bare rock over centuries into something that plants with roots can eventually colonize. Lichens are, in the most literal sense, the first speakers in the conversation between life and bare stone. They arrive first, say their patient piece over decades and centuries, and eventually their slow work makes way for the mosses, which make way for the grasses, which make way for the flowers and trees. The whole succession of an ecosystem begins with a lichen's slow communication with a rock. In forests, lichens that hang from tree branches, the long pale green streamers called old man's beard, for example, absorb moisture from mist and fog, and when they fall to the ground, as they do in storms, they add nitrogen to the soil. Some forest ecosystems depend significantly on this lichen fall as a nitrogen source. The lichen, growing slowly on its tree branch, is in a quiet conversation with the whole forest, contributing nutrients year by year, falling leaf-like to the ground, returning its small gifts to the soil. There are moments in certain forests where the atmosphere becomes almost visibly soft, where the air is misty, the branches draped with green and silver lichens, the floor a deep carpet of moss, and the whole place seems to muffle sound and slow time. These are often the most ancient and undisturbed forests, where the lichen and moss communities have been building for centuries. They feel different from younger forests. The air in them is different. Could visit such a forest tonight, and could visit such a forest tonight, and perhaps in your mind you can. You would feel more than anywhere the sense that the world has been here a very long time, and that it is working. That all of this living and communicating and cooperating is proceeding according to something deeper and more patient than anything we could plan or hurry. Let that sense of deep, mossy patience settle over you like a soft weight. Not oppressive, just grounding. The way a heavy blanket grounds you in bed without holding you back. The world is patient. The oldest living things have no appointments. They simply continue, and continuing is enough. You can rest now, softly, in the manner of lichen, unhurried, present, waiting for the morning with perfect, quiet ease. We have talked about how plants communicate warnings to each other, but the full story of plant protection is richer and more extraordinary than just signals on the wind. Plants have developed over millions of years a whole range of sophisticated ways to protect themselves and sometimes each other, and much of this protection involves communication with the animal and insect world in ways that are astonishingly clever. When a caterpillar begins to eat the leaves of a plant, the plant does not simply stand there and be eaten. It responds. Within minutes, sometimes within seconds, the cells around the damaged area begin to produce chemical compounds that change the taste of the leaf, making it less palatable. Within hours, these signals have spread through the whole plant, and new leaves being produced will have higher levels of tannins and other defensive compounds built in from the start. The plant is adjusting its own chemistry in real time, responding to the attack. But it also reaches outward. Some plants, when attacked by caterpillars, release specific blends of volatile chemicals into the air, and these chemicals are detectable to the natural enemies of caterpillars, certain parasitic wasps. These wasps lay their eggs inside caterpillars, and the caterpillar eventually dies. When the attacked plant sends its chemical signal, it is effectively calling for help. The wasps arrive, locate the caterpillars, and deal with them. The plant has recruited an ally through chemistry. The signal is precise enough that the wasps can distinguish plants attacked by one species of caterpillar from plants attacked by a different species. Different caterpillars trigger different chemical blends. Different wasp species respond to different blends. The communication is remarkably specific. This three-way interaction, plant, herbivore, and predator, is called a tritrophic relationship, and it has been documented in dozens of plant species. Corn, tobacco, cotton, lima beans, wild cabbage, all of them send distress calls when attacked, and all of them have their own community of allies that respond. The plant communicates its need, and the natural world delivers a solution. Some plants go further. Acacia trees in certain regions are protected by ants, which live in the thorns of the acacia and aggressively defend the tree against insects, large herbivores, and even other plants that might shade the acacia or compete with it. The acacia, in turn, provides the ants with a sugary nectar from special glands on its leaves, and sometimes provides housing in hollow thorns. The acacia advertises this deal through the composition of its nectar and the specific chemistry of its surfaces. The ants read the signals and respond. Once established, the relationship is maintained continuously, an ongoing conversation between tree and colony, one of the most intimate partnerships in the natural world. The relationship between plants and seed-dispersing animals is another form of protection, or rather, of collaborative care for the future. A fruit-bearing tree invests enormous resources in producing sweet, colorful, nutritious fruits. And what does it get in return? Animals that eat the fruit and walk or fly away, depositing the seeds in their waste far from the parent tree, in potentially new and favorable ground. The tree has, in effect, hired a distribution network. It pays in fruit, and its seeds are carried far and wide. The communication here happens through color, smell, texture, and flavor, all of which the plant controls and which have been refined through millions of years of coevolution with specific dispersers. Figs are sweet at exactly the ripeness that suits their specific dispersal animals. Berries turn red when ripe because many fruit-eating birds can see red especially well. Tropical fruits with hard outer shells and very rich flesh attract large mammals capable of processing them. Every detail of every fruit is a message addressed to a specific audience. Some plants protect their seeds through the hardest possible shells. Coconuts, chestnuts, hard-shelled nuts of all kinds. These thick coats protect the seed through a full year between fruiting and germination, sometimes longer. They can be carried by flood or ocean current, by rolling down a hillside, by being cached and then forgotten by a squirrel. The protective shell is a message to time. Survive. Wait. The right moment will come. Other seeds are protected by passing through an animal's digestive system. The acid and enzymes of digestion actually help break down the seed coat, preparing the seed for germination. Some seeds germinate better after passing through an animal than they do when planted by hand. The plant has designed its seed to be eaten, knowing that the animal's body is part of the process of release and renewal. Everything in the plant world, when you look closely, is a form of communication, protection, reproduction, feeding, warning, welcoming, all expressed through chemistry, color, scent, timing, and form. The plant speaks without words in the only language it knows, and the world listens and responds. You can let your thoughts drift now to whatever green place you love most. A garden, a park, a field you walked through once on a warm afternoon. Know that in that place, all of these conversations are happening. The chemical calls for help, the ant partnerships, the fruit ripening its message for birds, the seed waiting in its hard coat for the right moment. The world is never simply still. It is always, in every direction, alive and communicating. And tonight, in its own wordless way, it is saying, rest. Everything here is being taken care of. Water is the language beneath all other plant languages. Every chemical signal, every fungal message, every volatile compound released on the breeze, all of it depends on water. Water is the medium in which plant chemistry takes place, the carrier of nutrients through roots and stems, the currency of cellular life. A plant's relationship with water is one of the most fundamental conversations in the living world, and it begins long before a root touches a water molecule. When a seed germinates, when it receives enough moisture and warmth to begin its extraordinary transformation from dormancy to life, it sends out a root tip before it sends out a shoot. The root reaches downward first, before anything appears above the ground, before light is sought, before air is exchanged. The plant seeks water. It is the first priority, the first request sent into the world. The movement of water through a plant is itself a form of communication, a continuous hydraulic message passing through every cell, every tissue, every leaf. Water drawn up from the roots creates a tension in the columns of water rising through the plant's vascular tissue. This tension is transmitted upward like a signal through a rope. At the leaves, water evaporates into the air through tiny pores called stomata, and this evaporation pulls more water upward from below. The process is called transpiration, and a large tree may move hundreds of liters of water through its body on a warm, sunny day. When drought comes and water becomes scarce, the plant closes its stomata, the tiny pores in the leaves. Special cells called guard cells change shape in response to a water stress signal, and the pore closes. This reduces transpiration, slowing the loss of the precious water remaining in the plant's tissues. But it also slows photosynthesis, since the same pores that let water out also let carbon dioxide in. The plant trades productivity for survival. It closes down gently, conserving what it has, waiting for rain. The signal that triggers this stomatal closure travels through the plant quickly. It involves a compound called abscisic acid, produced in the roots and leaves when water stress is detected. That is transported through the plant's vascular system, triggering responses at every point along its path. The leaves receive the message from the roots. Water is scarce. Begin conserving. The response is coordinated, plant-wide, and happens within hours of the drought beginning to set in. When rain returns and soil moisture increases, the guard cells receive new signals. The stomata reopen, and the plant resumes its full conversation with the air, drawing in carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen and water vapor, conducting photosynthesis. The reopening of a plant after drought is one of the most quietly joyful things in the living world. It happens without celebration, without announcement. The leaf simply unfurls a little more. The guard cells relax, the pores open, and the plant breathes again. Some plants have developed extraordinary abilities to communicate with water across very dry conditions. Desert plants, cacti, succulents, the drought-adapted shrubs of hot, dry lands, have evolved a variety of strategies to find, store, and conserve water that are among the most ingenious adaptations in the plant kingdom. The cactus stores water in its succulent stem, surrounded by a waxy coating that prevents evaporation with no leaves, which would lose water to the air. Just spines, which are modified leaves condensed to their smallest possible form, losing almost no moisture. The saguaro cactus of the Sonoran Desert can absorb hundreds of liters of water during a single rainstorm, swelling its accordion-pleated stems, storing this water for the long, dry months ahead. It is a living water tank, its whole body architecture dedicated to the central conversation. Gather water while you can, hold it, be patient. The leaves of desert plants often have other water-conserving strategies. Silver or gray surfaces reflect sunlight and stay cooler. Waxy surfaces create a waterproof barrier. Small leaf area reduces the surface from which water can evaporate. Hairy surfaces create a boundary layer of still air next to the leaf, reducing evaporation. Every adaptation is, in its own way, a response to the message that water sends or fails to send from the surrounding environment. Water also shapes plant communication in landscapes. Riparian plants, those that grow along riverbanks and stream sides, have developed specific relationships with the water itself. Some plants stabilize banks with their roots, holding soil in place, reducing erosion. In return, the slower, clearer water is better for their own survival. The willows and alders along a river are in constant communication with the current, their roots threading into the banks, their branches shading the water, moderating the temperature, creating habitat for fish and insects that, in turn, deposit nutrients in the water that feed the plant's roots. A healthy river with trees along its banks is a single integrated system, a conversation between water and soil, root and current, shade and light, that has been going on in undisturbed places for thousands of years. The river shapes the trees shape the river. Neither is quite itself without the other. You're made largely of water, too. The cells of your body are mostly water, and the chemistry of your thoughts and dreams takes place in a watery medium. Like the plant with its hydraulic messages and its open stomata, your body is in continuous conversation with water, breathing, cooling, flowing through the biochemical pathways of sleep and restoration. As you drift toward a deeper rest now, you might imagine the sound of water, a quiet stream, or rain on leaves, or just the deep silence of a cloud-heavy sky before the first drop falls. Let that quiet wetness settle over your thoughts. Let the hydraulic messages of your own body carry you smoothly and without effort toward the deeper place where sleep waits. You have nearly arrived. The conversation is almost done for tonight, and the water knows the way. We are almost at the end of our walk through the secret language of plants, and the path has brought us here to the soft, dark edge of sleep. In the time we have been traveling together, we have gone beneath the soil and followed the threads of the wood wide web. We have risen into the air and breathed in the fragrant messages of flowers. We have knelt beside the sensitive plant and watched its leaves fold. We have placed our hands against the bark of a very old tree and felt, without words, the accumulation of centuries. We have listened to the language of roots and water, of chemistry and light, of patience and deep time. And in all of it, one thing has been constant. The natural world is speaking continuously in a language that is gentle and unhurried and designed for survival and connection, not for urgency or fear. Plants do not shout. Even their most urgent communications, the chemical signals that mean, loosely, danger here, prepare yourselves, are slow and drift on the wind at their own pace. The receiving plants take hours to respond. The conversation has time built into it. There is no rushing. There is only the steady, ancient exchange of signals between organisms that have been communicating with each other and with the earth since before the first fish walked out of the sea. Imagine, as you rest now, a single leaf, not a whole tree, not a forest, just one leaf, perhaps the leaf of something growing near where you are right now, or a leaf you noticed today on a walk, or the imagined leaf of whatever plant feels most peaceful to you, a simple oval of green, or a deeply lobed maple leaf, or the long thin blade of a lily, or a blade of grass. Just one leaf. That leaf is, right now, even in the dark of night, doing things. Its cells are respiring, the cellular machinery running quietly in the absence of light. The mitochondria in each cell burning small quantities of sugars to keep the cell alive through the night. The guard cells in the stomata are tending their gate, allowing a small flow of air, even in the dark. The water in the leaf cells is maintaining just the right pressure to keep the cell walls firm and the leaf from wilting. The leaf knows what to do in the dark. It has been doing it for millions of years, and if you were able to hold that leaf and bring it very close, close enough to smell, it might carry the faintest trace of the volatile compounds that make each species of plant its own. The clean green of an oak leaf, the cool freshness of mint, the mild, sun-warmed scent of lavender, the soft resinous quality of pine. Each one is, in its own way, a signature, the plant's exhalation, its small continuous communication with the air. The world of plant communication continues through the night. In the soil, the fungal threads pulse gently with the movement of nutrients between trees. In the dark, the moth pollinates the night-blooming flower, following its trace of fragrance to the pale petals. In the forest, the old tree stands in the silence, its roots in conversation with the earth, its crown barely moving in the still night air. The seeds in the soil sleep on, counting their required hours of cold, waiting for the accumulated warmth of spring that will tell them, now, begin. The light is right, the temperature is right, the moisture is right. It is time to open, to send down a root and up a shoot to join the conversation. Everything in its own time opens. You have journeyed well tonight. You have been carried through 500 million years of green, patient life, through soil and air and water, through the extraordinary slowness and the extraordinary ingenuity of plants finding ways to speak and listen and care for one another. This is the world you live in. It is much more alive, much more communicative, much more tenderly organized than it appears at first glance. And it is asking nothing of you right now. The trees do not need you to do anything. The moss on the stone is not waiting for your response. The wood wide web continues its quiet work without any input from you at all, and will continue all through your sleeping hours and into the new morning without pause. You are free, entirely free, to do nothing at all, to simply rest. Let your body be heavy. Let your breath come and go without any effort on your part. It knows what to do, the same way a root tip knows which direction is down and which is toward water. Your body has its own wisdom, its own circadian rhythm, counting down through the night hours to the moment when sleep deepens and dreams begin. The sensitive plant has folded its leaves. The sunflower faces east in the dark, waiting for dawn. The night-blooming jasmine has sent its message into the cool air, and the moth has found it, and the flower will set seed, and the cycle will continue. The great mother trees are standing in their forests, their mycorrhizal networks softly active, passing carbon to their young. All of this continues, all of this is fine. And you, here, now, you are also part of it, breathing oxygen made by leaves, made of carbon that was once part of a plant, and before that part of the air, and before that part of some other living thing in an unbroken chain stretching all the way back to the beginning of life on Earth. You are not outside this conversation. You have never been outside it. You are in it completely, the way a root is in the soil, held, nourished, part of something larger and more generous than you could ever fully see. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let the thought of the green world be the last clear image in your mind. not any specific plant, not any particular forest, just the quality of green itself, that soft, living, photosynthetic color that means alive, growing, speaking to the light. Let the language of plants, quiet, chemical, patient, generous, ancient beyond telling, be the last language you hear tonight, drifting through your thoughts as gently as pollen on a still morning air. You are deeply rested. You are warm and held. Sleep is very close now. Thank you for spending this evening with us here on the Sleepy Nature Channel. If this story brought you any peace or wonder, we would love for you to tell us in the comments. Even a single word, just a color or a feeling or the name of a plant you love. And please share this with someone who might need a quiet night. The whole playlist is there for you whenever you need it. Good night. Let the green world keep watch while you sleep. It has been doing it for a very long time, and it is very, very good at it.